Welcome to my channel. My name is Genevieve, the Practical Intuitive Healer. So I'm excited for today's question for a psychic, and that is, how do we know when something is really right for us? How do we make the right choice? How do we know if it's really a true yes for us or a true no? So making choices is something that we obviously have to do every day, between like what to get for lunch and what to text your friend. I don't know, we're making choices constantly all the time, usually without thinking. But when a person comes to a psychic specifically about a choice they need to make, it's usually about something big, life-changing, and there is some confusion over what is the next right step for them. Either there are a couple different options, or there seems to be no clear next step and they're wanting some ideas as to what's happening in their life and what to do next. So today we're going to specifically look at how to use your own intuition to make choices for yourself in terms of these bigger life things. But I guess you could also use it for what you want for lunch, but that's usually a little easier. So the first big thing that we need to establish before we can touch in with our intuition around choice making is, what is your intuition and what isn't. So a lot of people will confuse their emotions with their intuition, and that is a super common mistake. Our emotions are usually a strong, overwhelming feeling, especially if it's a negative emotion, but even really positive emotions. And when we're flooded by the chemical body response of our emotions, it feels like that emotion is all there is. We just forget that there's other things to consider, or what maybe our quiet intuition is trying to remind us or tell us in the background. So the difference between your emotional response and your intuitive response is one that you're going to need to practice how to check in with, because your intuitive response is always going to be a lot quieter. It's not going to be necessarily this overwhelming, like, oh my gosh, I have to do this. I mean, sometimes it will be, but that's usually only when it's happening in tandem with an emotional response. If your emotional response is in congruity with your intuitive response, they're on the same page. But it can happen very often that our emotions and our intuition are not always on the same page. Sometimes they're on totally separate pages. So let's jump into some examples of this to understand what the heck I'm talking about. So say that it's always been your dream to be a published writer, but and you've always had this dream, and it's something that you've wanted to do forever, but there is just something inside of you that has felt like, I can't do that. There's just some block in you that's like, it has all these excuses. There's just a lot of feeling of like stuckness there. That's a really good example of when your intuition is at odds, not on the same page as your emotions. So you have developed an emotional response to something that's really good for you, and the emotional response is misinformed and saying that that's way too scary to go down that road. I can't do it. It's going to be too hard. People are going to laugh at me. Your emotions come from your ego, and your ego wants to keep you safe. So that's a good example of when your intuitive knowing and your intuitive drive that wants to go for the things that are really natural to you, that you have natural skill in, that are really soul feeding to you, when that feeling is at odds with an emotional response that your brain has built. So that's one thing. In terms of making choices though around, say, picking a job, this is a big one. So say you are changing jobs and there are two companies that want to take you under their wing. They're both interested in you, and maybe you're interested in both of them. So how would you make that choice as to which company is really the best to go with? a choice that's coming from an intuitive knowing within you that just knows that this is the right next step, as opposed to all of the logical things that you can also take into consideration, but we're not going to go into in this video. So when it comes to knowing which is the right path for me in terms of something that's kind of similar, like which job is right for me and which isn't, this is where you really need to get quiet with yourself and start practicing how to touch in with that quiet, intuitive knowing that is deep inside you. So after you have written all the pros and cons of each job, and after you have gone over all the logical reasons why this one would work or this one would work, just find a way to get really quiet with yourself. Maybe close your eyes and sit with it. And imagine yourself working in each job. Hopefully by the time that you are doing this exercise, you've met the people associated with each job, you have been in the building, if there is a building, if it's not a remote job, what it looks like, kind of what it feels like in the building. So close your eyes and start with one of them and just imagine yourself in each of the jobs. And give yourself enough time to really feel out each one. So maybe spend a few minutes even in your mind really like doing visceral things like going to your desk, talking to the other employees, really feeling what does it feel like viscerally to be in each job. And after you've experienced how each one of those feels, you will have some sort of deeper intuitive knowing that one of those was right for you. And it's a difficult feeling to fully describe, but it's something that's like, it's just a very deep internal thing that's like, oh, this one was the right one for me. And a spoiler alert is usually the first, if it's between two choices or even 3 or 4, whatever it is you're trying to consider, if whatever the first one that came to mind was that you wanted to explore first, usually that means that that's a sign that's the one that you're most interested in, and that might be a sign that that's the one that you are the most drawn to and therefore maybe meant to go into. So you can do that exercise with literally anything. It doesn't have to be jobs. It could be buying a house, buying a car. It could even be with relationships. You could imagine yourself, if you're having trouble knowing if you have a future with someone, if you're with a partner and you're just not sure what the future is like, imagine yourself getting married to that person. Imagine yourself buying an apartment or a house or whatever with that person. Really viscerally take yourself there in your imagination and see how does your body feel when you go to those places, and how does it feel? Does it feel like it's totally the right thing for you and it's exactly what should be happening? Or is it that even when you are living in the fantasy of what you think you want with that person, there's something that still feels a little bit off and you're not sure how to explain it? So that's a really good visceral practice to start getting in touch with your intuition. It's also a great practice for getting your emotions on the same page as your intuition, because it can be so hard when our emotions are attached to things that are either wrong for us, or our emotions are really afraid of the things that are right for us and our intuition is saying something else. That's when it's so hard to make decisions, because there's just such a big thing at odds happening between intuition and emotions. But that practice of getting really quiet, going into a meditative space, and going into what I actually would call a psychic meditation to explore each of those options for yourself to see which one really does feel right. So that is what I have for you today in terms of how to make decisions, how to make choices, big choices, using your intuition to know what is the next right step for you. My last little piece of information that I want to give you is a reminder that life is meant to be lived. And sometimes when we're having trouble making these choices and these decisions, it's almost like either of them would be a good answer. We just need to choose something. Sometimes we we feel so safe being in like the waffling back and forth energy that we just don't want to make a choice, even though that's what we need to do, is just make some choice. So if you find yourself in that space where it's like no matter what you do, you just feel like you're going to make the wrong choice, the sign is that you need to just make a choice and experience life. If you make a wrong choice, that's totally fine. We're human. That's what we're meant to do. If you pick the wrong job, if you sign up for the wrong apartment, you'll learn something. Be able to correct it later when you make the next right choice for yourself. You'll have more information. So don't let this pressure of needing to know the exact right answer before you do something stop you from making a choice. Thank you so much for watching my video today. Please subscribe if you would like to get more psychic information from me on how to develop your intuition, and also just practical tips for how to live a better life. Please subscribe, and I will see you in my next video.